It's enhanced by grasping. And what happens? So, all this time we had the seed lying there, on the mental consciousness. And now attachment and grasping arise. And those do too. What do? They are like, if you have a seed, and the seed, when you have a seed, like a sunflower seed. Let's go back to the seed, because we use the word seed for a specific reason, because there's some similarity when it comes to real seeds. So when you take a sunflower seed, you can have that sunflower seed for years, just sitting on a cupboard, nothing happens. So even though that is kind of the main cause, if you like, or the substantial cause for a sunflower, nevertheless, for the sunflower to actually grow, you need other things to activate that seed, to germinate the seed. Does everyone know the word? Yeah, to germinate the seed. So the same is true for the karmic seed we've left up here. Because even though a lot of other things have happened, we've kind of left the seed for a while because it's just still lying there. Now we get back to the original seed that was in the first lifetime. This is lifetime number 1, was accumulated. In lifetime number 2, which started here, nothing really happened until the time of death. Now, what happens is, number 10 is germinated. Existence. Now, existence, the word existence, and it's the same in Tibetan. This is a translation, this is a literal translation. Existence is the name of the effect given to the cause. The name of the effect is given to the cause. Actually, existence hasn't happened yet. What is it that's happening? The seed here, the seed that has been lying here, has now been activated by attachment and grasping. Attachment and grasping have kind of, when you have a tiny seed and suddenly with water and warmth, the seed starts germinating. It kind of blows up. This is why I just write it like this, so to get back to the example. So now the seed has been activated by attachment and grasping to the self. So it's not enough to have a karmic seed. You must have the ignorance too, which leads to grasping and attachment to the self. So then the person dies. Life number 3 starts. No, poodle's gone. No poodle. A New Zealand person. Right? So, I could say giraffe or whatever, but I just wanted to move away from the animal run just to have a contrast. Okay, so this was a human leaving the seed for being human, being born as a New Zealand person. And then there was the poodle life. But even though there was a long poodle life, the seed was not affected. It lay there dormant. Until, at the time of death, for some reason, of all the different seeds that lay there already, but we're focusing on just one, attachment and grasping germinated this seed. And its non-existence hasn't happened yet, but the name of the effect is given to the cause. We've had that before. The name of the cause is given to the effect. But this happens a lot. In Tibetan in Buddhism in general, this happens a lot. To stress the relationship between cause and effect. Sometimes the name of the cause is given to the effect, sometimes the name of the effect is given to the cause. So in this case, it's called existence, but you could actually also call it the state where the compelling karmic seed has been germinated. And once that's germinated, there's no turning back. You must be reborn. You can't stop it. Previously, you could still purify. You could still purify this. But here you can't purify anymore, because now it's germinated. And what do you have then? 11, birth. Birth coming from this compelling karma, which was germinated by those two. And then, as it's bound to happen, all the suffering that are associated with being born, which eventually lead to aging and death. Aging and death. Oh my god, my handwriting is really bad. I hope you can still see it. Okay, so you see how we've taken the perspective here of what happens to karma and the imprints, then we move to the fact that we need to communicate, and for all the delusions to arise, there must be certain conditions. We must first have a mind that can get in touch with the objects around. And then, because ignorance has always been here, it's always somehow been, of course, continuing too. Yeah, with ignorance, that's like the root, but we still continue with ignorance. Ignorance is just lying there, sometimes dormant, sometimes actively. So therefore, when we make contact with objects and there's feeling, there's of course attachment and grasping. But attachment and grasping, now we go to the time of death, because we need to get back to the seed, which then at the time of death germinates. Right? As number 10 germinates, this is where there's no going back. Poodle life ends, birth of the New Zealand person starts. But of course, the first moment of birth then means you're already bound to age and die. Right? So this is the explanation of us taking rebirth from the point of view of 3 lifetimes. From the point of view of just 3 lifetimes. So this is how the Buddha traditionally explained it. These are the 12 links in their order, looking at it from the point of view of 3 lifetimes. And of course, what's important to understand, if you take those 12 links, and it's totally up to us, to put them that way. There's different ways of doing this, right? Obviously, it's not like there's not another way. But if we take those 12 links, it's obvious that, of course, before the poodle was born, something like that must have happened too, right? In a different way. There were another link of, another circle of 12 links. There was, just before the death of me, there was attachment and grasping at the time of death, and then the poodle previously accumulated from some different ignorance, accumulated compelling karma or throwing karma, is now ripened, and then there's birth, right? With, of course, here, it's happening here at the same time, it's birth, and then slowly aging and death. And again, as long as I have attachment and grasping, again, another seed building. And it goes on and on and on. And sometimes, in between here, I can have many lifetimes. It doesn't have to happen, in between here. I don't have to, at the end of this lifetime, have to have the seed that I previously accumulated, or the karma. This actually ripening already in the next lifetime. But I can have many lifetimes in between. Thousands of lifetimes. And then once the time has come, then there's attachment and grasping, and then I take rebirth. Yes, Shana?
So, what is
the microphone? I repeat the question for you.
What is there to do in this 8th and 9th stage, practically, in order to, I don't know?
Very good question. What is there to do? So we get have trapped circles and circles and circles, so many circles. It's not just this circle. There's other circle, happening at the same time, right? As we've just seen, there's another circle here. Now, if there's new ignorance here somewhere, in the middle of our lives, again, that starts a new circle. So what are we going to do? Where do we break the circle? Well, that comes later. It's a good question, but this all come, and I'll read the text to you now. Okay, I'll read the text to you, but before I start sitting down with the text, and we just go over it again now with the text, hoping to make it clear, but just reading through it again, but to just give you the symbolics. The symbolics that you find in this, if you look at the 12 weeks, we really need to get somebody to see it closer, or maybe if you Google it, Google image, whatever, so you can actually see it. Oh, you have it there, so great. So, number 1 is, as I said, the blind person with a stick, kind of hobbling, it's like an elderly person with a stick, and they say, either this person can't see at all, or they can't see very far, because the ignorance kind of keeps them very close-minded. Yeah. Okay. And then number 2 is the potter, right? Do you have a potter there?
It's very difficult.
Just see, okay. Because there's also sometimes different symbolics, but I'm just familiar with the potter image. Where there's someone with the potter, the wheel, and it's like, it's formative action, so it's like this idea of forming something, but of course, the wheel of a potter, once you spin it, it turns for a long time. So again, once you've created the karma, it'll stay for a long time, or for however long it takes, until it ripens. It doesn't get lost. So that's the wheel. Number 3, as I said yesterday, consciousness, the monkey mind. Like an unruly monkey. Go from one to the next, go one to the next. But even though it goes from one to the next, it holds the seeds. Right? The mind holds the seeds, so don't get lost with the mind. Number 4, name and form. So, we're reborn somewhere with that same seed. The seed has not been activated yet. But just to show that the seed stays there in an inactivated inactivated state no matter what happens. So then you're reborn, name and form. Okay? Name and form just means a boat and the person inside it. So our body is like our boat and the consciousness is like the person inside it. Okay, name and form. That's what happens right from the beginning. Yeah? So when you're reborn, of course the resultant consciousness enters, the ovum, and once it's entered it, you have name and form. Name and form. Then the next is what develops as an embryo. First there's just a mess of yogurt-like, the Tibetan scriptures talk about a yogurt or curd-like mass, which just means the mass of cells. And then these cells, because of the genetic material, start forming in different ways. Okay, and then the 6 sense spheres are built. And that's like the 6 windows of a house with 6 windows. Because really it's like the windows that allow us to, it's our window to the door, it's our window to the world. Or the door to the world. So oftentimes in the commentary by Lama Tsongkhapa talks about the door to the world. But the imagery that's used is that of 6 windows, allowing us to make contact with the world. Contact is like now really having everything you need, and now you make contact with the objects. Right? Immediately preceding condition. This is always going off, yeah. No, it's nothing to do. But as long as you hear me, it doesn't matter. So, there's the immediately preceding condition, there's the shapes or whatever objects they are, and then the physical basis. Once it's developed, there's contact, which is depicted as a man and woman kissing. There's a picture of a man and woman kissing, just this contact. And then the next one is feeling. It's a cruel picture. It's someone having an arrow in his eye. Yeah. It's like saying the eye is so sensitive. So just a piece of dust and we can feel it. But feeling can be like an arrow, right? An arrow in the eye. So there's like this cruel picture of a person with an arrow in the eye. And then there's of course, then we take it to the time of death. The feeling of displeasure when we die, the feeling of having to, stop the body kind of leaving the mind leaving the body. That kind of feeling of fear, which then leads to attachment. And the picture of attachment is of a person drinking beer. Yeah, it's drinking beer. So it's obvious, how certain intoxicants can lead us to be attached. So we're attached to ourselves, just as someone can be attached to certain intoxicants. Stronger than that, actually. Anyway, and then grasping, it's again a monkey grasping at an apple. Like how monkeys do it. I mean, you come to Dharamsala. When someone leaves apples in their room and leaves the door open, oh my God, you're screwed. You better wait until that huge male monkey leaves your room, and even if they make a mess, you're not going to get them out. And it's an apple, oh my God, and if there's 7 apples, they bite into each apple. A friend of mine had an apple had like beautiful apples that come from North India, from our home city, and a monkey came into her room. And we thought, oh shit, the monkey can't eat that many apples, don't worry. But it had been, so you couldn't do anything with the apples. They were all monkey saliva all over it. We had to throw them all away. Anyway, so that's the grasping, That's the grasping at an apple, a monkey grasping at an apple. Okay, so attachment, grasping. And then existence, the germination here, the germination of the seed, which in the next moment will lead. So this is like, you've done for it. This is germination has happened. You cannot turn back, right? If you were able to get rid of, well, I'll talk about this later, but if you hadn't those, this couldn't happen. Even though you have a seed, if those hadn't happened, so this is very interesting. Even though you have seeds, and we have accumulated a lot of seeds, if we don't have those, it's not going to happen. Right? If we, certain states, so it's really our states of mind, our grasping onto ourself that leads to this. And of course, where does the grasping come from?
Ignorance.
So it kind of answers Shani's question a little bit. Yeah? a little bit, but we haven't really talked too much about it. But anyway, so ignorance is responsible for having those kind of induced states, attachment to the self, grasping to the self. First we misperceive the self, that's ignorance. And then we hold on to it. And then we hold a little stronger. Especially when we die, oh my God, I'm losing myself. That's so scary. Yeah? It's a sense we lose ourselves because we lose our body, we identify with our body. We identify with our coarse mind, and that keeps absorbing into the subtler mind. So because we can't activate the subtler mind, we have a sense we lose ourselves. Because all we know is the coarser mind. If that keeps kind of becoming unclear, like there's nothing to hold on to. Okay, and this is depicted as a woman being pregnant. 8 months pregnant, 9 months pregnant. So it's really like this kind of this idea, it's about to happen. Can't stop it anymore. Right? 9 months pregnant. So it's a picture of a 9 months pregnant woman kind of bleeding back. The kiss, it's also sometimes depicted, I think, as a man and woman lying together, but I'm not sure the context. Anyway, this picture just comes to mind. So there's different pictures sometimes. So sometimes contact, I think, is a man and woman lying together. Or is that somewhere else? Is it existence? But what about the pregnant woman? Birth. Is that? Yeah, birth. It's birth. Anyway, I'm getting confused. I'll look it up because there's different imagery. So, okay. I'll make sure after the break I'll let
Birth
you know.
is somebody is giving birth. A woman.
Birth is someone, okay, then you still have the
Existence,
pregnant woman.
somebody in the pregnant.
This is pregnancy, and this is someone giving birth, exactly.
Yeah.
So is there, what is contact? How is contact depicted? Is it a man and woman kissing, or is it a man and woman
A man and
lying
we. Wait a minute.
lying together? So here you go. So contact can be depicted by man and woman kissing. Maybe along, if he finds it. It's another picture, maybe.
This symbolized by the contact of a man and a woman.
Man and a woman. So here, yeah, so I think it's really contact. It's either a kiss or just really the lying together. Just this contact, right? Which is intense. So, and then birth is giving birth, and aging and death is again, you know, it's depicted as a person growing old and so forth. All right, so these are basically the 12 links in this order. Yeah, in this order of taking into consideration 3 lifetimes. 3 lifetimes. This is the order in which traditionally these are taught. And in the break, I go through the order which is not the traditional one, where you have just 2 lifetimes. So the least you can have is 2. But you cannot have just 1, because, as we know, propelling karma cannot ripen in this 1 lifetime. Okay. So I was going to read to you, but I can do that after the break. Just read through it again. So now you've understood it. The reading will be easy. I'll read through it. Then I give you an explanation of the different kind of, and this is now easy. Yeah, a different kind of version of this. We've finished reading this. I give you an explanation of the different order. Then we talk about what to do to actually undo this circle. And that basically completes the 12 links, the traditional way in which they're taught. So this we'll do in the afternoon. But let's take questions now. I'll sit down and I pass on the microphone to whoever.
Just could you explain more about the 6 rounds?
Explain more about the 6 rounds.
It doesn't have to be now.
Yeah, the problem is in terms of time, there's of course not that much time. The 6 rounds, I'm just thinking, what can I tell you to read, really? Because, let's see, I mean, I can keep it in mind for if we have more time. But really, there's amazing literature available, like Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand is very good. The Lamrim, Amazon Kappa's Lamrim. Pater Rinpoche's Words of My Perfect Teacher. Gampopa's Ornament to Liberation. I think there's some in there, yeah. Atisha's Lamp to the Path. I mean, there's all the Lamrim teachings, in other words, from whatever tradition. I mean, there are amazing Lamrim teachings around. And they usually have an explanation of the suffering in the lower realms, the suffering also in the higher realms. So this would be the best to read. And Google it. I promise you, it's really interesting. Well, you can Google, you know, Google just the higher realms, and then you have already an explanation there. There's a lot of material on the internet now. Of course, kind of try and make sure it's it's an author reliable. That's always the difficult part, you know. But yeah, that takes a bit of experience. So maybe take the books first, and then later on you gain some experience, and you can compare it to what you read on the internet. Right? Okay. Yes.
Just something that bothers me about lifetimes.
That bothers you about lifetimes. Okay.
I mean, there are a lot of research about it, and nothing is written about different lifetimes other than human.
Okay, so there's a lot of...
And also people recall things, and you say that all the memories, everything is lost when we die. So I don't understand how it can be.
Okay, her question is what bothers her about past and future lives is that there's a lot of research, and when people kind of do this research, it usually seems to be like when someone talks about previous lives or even remembering them, they talk about just the human life. There's never really like, oh, I was a poodle, right? Moreover, how could people remember anything if their minds at the time of death actually absorbs, if the course consciousness absorbs? Okay, so these are two questions. I want to answer the second part first. It's easier. Okay, so even though at the time of death the mind absorbs, but there is an explanation that when you, well, first of all, the mind absorbs, but the imprints continue. And the imprints are still quite strong, especially the one from the immediately preceding life. So even though the course of mind has gone, the imprints from that course of mind can ripen. And you can nevertheless have like flashes of memory. These memories are usually not very consistent. You have just flashes of memory, right? But oftentimes it's said when you die suddenly in an accident, then it's more likely that you remember because of the sudden death. So when you die slowly at the time, like at an advanced age, the mind slowly absorbs, and a lot of it is like very finely absorbed. But they say when someone dies very suddenly, I don't know what it is, maybe, I mean, everything must be absorbed, but there's some strength there, there's something that's nevertheless, maybe the imprints are so strong that they lead the person to remember their life. So there's an example I remember, there was something in an Indian newspaper, and you know, Indian newspapers are very matter of fact. Of course there's past and future lives, a big deal. And they just make a story out of it. And I have the story, and I put it as a bookmark in a book, and I don't find the book, but I'm still looking for it, and you know, I'm planning on making photocopies and giving it to people. It's very interesting. It's the story of a small boy born in India in some place. He was 5 years old, and he said, you know, ever since he was able to speak, he was terrified of tractors. Always very scared of tractors. You know, a tractor would come and he would run away without any apparent reason. The parents couldn't figure out why. Moreover, when he started speaking about his parents, saying, you know, I have another mom, I have another dad. You know, he was accepting of the parents of this lifetime, but kept talking about their other parents, saying they lived in so-and-so village. And the parents didn't know much, they didn't know about the village, they'd never heard of it. And you know, the name of the people, they hadn't heard of them. He kept saying, you know, the older he grew, the more he explained them. You know, my father's name is so-and-so, my father's a tailor, my mom does this and this, you know. And he went on and on and on because he was so persistent. And he said he misses his mom and he misses his dad. Well, his parents one day thought, well, let's, you know, do something about this. And they did some research, you know, in the limited ways that they could, and they found there was such a place. And they took the little boy to the village, and, you know, they went to the place where the boy took them, and there was nothing, I mean, the house had been shut down, there was a shutter, and that was it. So they asked, what happened? And they said, yeah, there was a man who was a tailor, but he's not there anymore. So they asked where he is. And they took them to the house, and he immediately remembered the house. And they went there, and the mom said, and they asked, did you have, and they didn't want to, you know, they first asked, and they said, yeah, we had a little boy who died in a tractor accident at the age of 7. He was overruled by a tractor. So you remember he had that fear of tractors. He, you know, probably had a horrific experience in those last moments before his death. And and it was a sudden death. He was still quite young until he remembered, you know, and he was able to give all the names of the brothers and sisters that he left behind. And there's a photograph with him. There's a photograph of him in his lifetime, then the mother of the previous lifetime, and the mother holding a picture of the boy in the previous lifetime. and they even look similar. Which explains that sometimes the karma is so strong, we may be reborn as a poodle, a white poodle, 3 or 4 lifetimes. It's not just, I mean, I've just made it very simple of just one lifetime, but one compelling karma can ripen in a series of lifetimes, right? So this boy actually looked even similar. Okay? All right, so this explains just that. And there was another case I've heard in India of a woman who was, of a girl, who kept saying, my husband killed me, my husband killed me. And she insisted this girl for so long, until they found their husband she was talking about, and they were able to establish that he had pushed her out of a train. And she was imprisoned because of the child's, I mean, they never knew, they thought it was an accident. But when the child then said, my husband killed me, a very sudden death, you know, and they went back and they believed this, but I mean, that was not enough. But they were actually then able to collect the evidence that was necessary to prosecute the husband for death of his previous, you know, his murder. That was a story many years back in India. So, but this just explains how you can take some, you know, some memory from one life to the next. Now, your other question, why not animals? Yeah, that's difficult. Why not? Why don't we remember other states? But I do remember one story I heard of a woman, a Western woman, who said she remembered a time in a previous life, and she couldn't say so much about it, but she said it was horrible. It was just a period of suffering. And some lama said to her, well, maybe it was a hell realm experience, right? So she said it was, you know, she had no problem with like believing the hell realm, because she said she existed before that and it was a horrific, horrible state. And didn't talk about cauldrons of hot boiling. I mean, that's just to symbolize the kind of suffering that people go through. But she said it was an immense suffering. That's all she remembered. And my guess is, also as a human, maybe what triggers our memories, you know, is that seeing something similar, having a similar experience in this lifetime may trigger those memories of a previous life. Whereas a dog experience of the world is probably so different from a human experience. I mean, you know, just how their eyes are built, and, you know, it's more smells that they perceive. Smells are more predominant than shapes. And the shapes they see, I mean, they're probably quite different from what we see. So, you know, this memory is not triggered, possibly, as a human. But again, we don't know. And I guess if a child starts talking about, I lived there and these were my parents, that's one thing. But if it starts talking about, I was a fly, then the parents are going to go, well, yeah, just get a hold on it. They call it shrink, right? So I think it's a little, it's more I mean, even in India, you know, it's more a human life. It's not, I mean, it is accepted in their culture somehow, but there's a little, it's not that much talking about animals as such. Yeah, in the Buddhist philosophy, it's stressed a lot more. And it's really interesting, even though the Indians believe in past and future lives, I sometimes read the obituary, what do you call it, in the newspapers when someone dies? Obituary. I have a thing with obituaries. I always read the obituaries in Indian newspapers, and it always says, may you be with God right now, and wait for us, we're coming. And I'm like, what about wait for us, and, you know, what about rebirth? And somehow they kind of have this picture of, you know, their loved ones are liberated, they're with God right now, and, you know, it's kind of like a mixture of other traditions, really. So, yeah. So therefore, even in Hinduism, there's not that much emphasis on like while I was a fly, or while I was, you know. So I think it comes all from there. So in India, it's really like when the child starts talking about remembering a human life, oh yeah, right, that, you know, was a human before, so they investigate it. If it says claims to be a fly, maybe it doesn't really come out in the public. And in our, yeah, I think, I'm not sure all the rebirth regresses that we do are also, like my mom was into this when I was quite young, I was a teenager. This is why I had this teenager rebellion. I'm not going to believe in past and future life because mom does, you know, for a long time we decided not to believe in past and future life because of that, because she was into this so much that she had some past life regress done. And she was all these great things, you know, she was a knight, she was always just great things, you know, so it was almost like you can see how people make money out of this by just telling you all the wonderful things you were, and I don't believe that you're always these great things. So I'm not sure that everyone who tells you you've been so-and-so is really really knowing what they're talking about. So anyway, that's just
An
my...
Egyptian princess is usually
Oh yeah, here you go. A pharaoh's wife, or you know, a knight, or an Egyptian princess, right? I'm like, how many Egyptian princesses were there?
But it's very funny because there is the expression of déjà vu.
Déjà vu, yes.
And then, yet we don't translate it to anything else but just saying déjà vu. But déjà vu can be an explanation for...
I agree. I
but
totally
we don't-
agree.
We just accept it as an expression, but we never go into it.
No, we don't. But I mean, I think déjà vu, I think also we need to be really careful with this one. I mean, it could be, and this takes me a little bit to the question that I still have lying here, well, sometimes we may dream about a place before going there. It's also possible. I mean, the mind is amazing. And I'm not saying we're all clairvoyant, but it's actually not such a big deal to be clairvoyant, to know things beforehand. And who knows? I mean, I remember once, and this is just something very ordinary, happens to a lot of people, but I remember this one dream. I had fallen asleep in my room and had left the light on. And I remember in my dream, the light bulb exploded. And I woke up, I look at the light bulb, and the light bulb exploded. So, you know, it's like, it's not a big deal actually. I think it's just because ignorance, you see the picture of ignorance of the woman kind of just being able to see in front of herself, not any further, if it's like a blind woman who's not totally blind. It's like ignorance keeps us so narrow-minded. It kind of does this. We're very much just focused on ourselves and on the immediate future, not much more. And so, really, if the ignorance was not there, we could perceive so much more. So therefore, you know, maybe sometimes there's moments of clarity that can come through for anyone. You know, I mean, this light bulb experience, I only had it once. It's not special, it just means nothing. So lots of people have them. They may not remember those dreams. But then you go to the place and it looks familiar because, you've seen it in a dream. So it could be that, but it could be very well that you've lived there before. You spent an entire lifetime there. And there's a karmic connection you have with the place, so you go back. And of course it also explains when we meet someone and we don't like them the moment we see them. There's no reason everyone loves them. I remember there was one nun once, and I've been able to come over it, this feeling now, but I could not stand her. She scared me. And I had no explanation for this, no explanation. And I tried to be around, I tried to be nice, but she always gave me the shivers. And she was a perfectly nice person, everyone liked her. And I'm not saying she did something, but something maybe was there. Or we meet people and we feel so attracted by them. Love on first sight. I guess they were married maybe in a previous life, right? I mean, we have sometimes the karma to be married with the same person over a couple of lifetimes. And that explains why love on first sight, right? It's like almost like you recognize them because you're very familiar with them in a way.
These
We
are the
continue.
same mistakes we are doing all the time.
Yes, you're right. Get the same person again and again. Oh my God, yeah. If it's not a good person, I mean. But anyway, so it's interesting. It's very interesting. And to me, it explains a lot. It explains the idea of geniuses. You know, like Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. You know, like his dad was pretty good, his mom was pretty good, but he was really, really, really good. And he only had the genetic material of his parents. So like, you have someone who really outstands. So it means he's probably, you know, done something, he's accumulated enough merit for this talent that he had in a previous life, not to totally disintegrate, but, you know, be moved on. So certain talents, they explain those. People are born with certain talents that their parents may not have. And I don't believe it's because they got mother milk more than, you know, or whatever, you know, some of these bizarre reasons. A lot of this explains why identical twins are actually not that identical, right? Yeah, I mean, they can be so similar, they can be so different, but genetically they have the exactly same material, right? Anyway, any other questions? Yes?
about the fifth link, six
Six sense spheres. Oh, yeah.
What is the introspective sense? And it says here in the text that although they've been before as a collection, they come out of the fourth link.
This is what I
what
was
does it
trying to avoid because this text is not easy. Okay, I'll answer this because we read this today. We read this today after we have after this session, in the afternoon session. We'll actually read the entire text. Now you have a good picture, and I definitely try to explain that. Yeah. So please, if I don't, remind me right then. Yeah. I just don't want to. I want to go with questions on now, and this will be part of afternoon's class, just during the text. So I've not done it in the way of like taking you through each verse. I want you to understand the entirety, and then reading it so much easier. Okay. Any other? Yeah.
About the sixth sense.
Sixth sense. Yes.
You're talking about mental consciousness, and what are the objects of that?
Okay.
And also, doesn't it connected to the brain, like thoughts? I mean, you take out any physical property to it. I don't understand.
Yeah. Okay, mental consciousness, okay, it's a lot more complicated. The sense consciousnesses are easier. The sense consciousnesses, however, are giving the same weight because our sense consciousnesses, as ordinary people, are our windows to the world. So really, you know, what we mentally reflect upon is usually what we see, hear, and so forth. Okay, so the mental consciousness is actually a lot more complicated. First of all, the mental consciousness has different levels of coarseness and subtlety. So there's definitely the coarsest level that we experience as ordinary beings while we're awake. Very much related to the brain. And then there's subtler levels where it's a little subtler, so such as the dream state. Right? The dream state. Still very much related to the brain, but if you look at the the brain activity in the person dreaming, oftentimes it's a little reduced, right? It's not as strong, there's not that much happening as opposed to a person being awake. So then, being awake, the mind is coarser. When you sleep, it's a little deeper. Deep sleep is even deeper. And then there's the most subtle mind, the clear-light mind. So we can actively control our coarse consciousness. That we can control. That's, you know, the brain. That's, you know. So any object can be its object. Anything can be its object. The five senses, the five sense objects can be its objects. But even objects such as emptiness or, you know, non-existences can become its object. We can perceive the world to be flat. The flat world doesn't exist, but we can still perceive it. We can still think about it. So that's the mental consciousness. And it's only the coarser level, as I just said, that's dependent on the brain. So of course, for that child, and I believe, the reason we don't remember anything about our perception, anything about, you know, when we entered the womb, we don't even remember anything really, is definitely because the subtle consciousness was active then. It was more subtler levels because there was no brain. Only the subtler level could be present then. The subtle level is active when we die. We're not aware of that. And then as the mind becomes a little coarser, it's still pretty subtle in the continuum of the baby. Brain is not necessary. It's not there, so therefore you can't activate anything coarser. So we have no recollection of that. Yeah. And then the coarser it gets, the more we're able to control it. Sometimes we can control our dreams. In a dream, we can train ourselves to think, I'm dreaming, so let's dream something else. People can do that. But it's basically as a Buddhist practitioner, especially when you get into Tantra, what you're trying to control is now the subtler levels of mind. Which explains why some people don't need to go to sleep anymore. Because for us, we need to sleep in order for the subtle levels to arise. But because we can't do anything with them, we are unconscious. Right? We can't communicate with anyone, we just lie there still. Whereas a person who's highly realized can utilize the subtle mind and can still be around talking to people. So they don't have to sleep like us. They still do what's necessary. What the body needs is to, take some time off, and the subtle light levels have to arise. But for us, we just lie unconscious. But this is also why Tantra is so dangerous. Because you don't want to fool around with your subtle levels of consciousness. You do something wrong, we can screw it up, big time. I'm serious. I know definitely of one German guy who's lost it because of doing some practice. I think, maybe, I don't know whether Vila remembers him, was a German man. He just wanted to do a Tantra and, did the wrong thing, and he's still in the institution in Germany. So, very dangerous. But what you're doing is you're trying to activate subtle levels of mind as a practitioner. But what we do, it's only the coarser level that we can really utilize. And this is why we only remember certain parts of our childhood when the coarsest levels were actually now active enough so we can recollect them. Just as we don't remember, from last night when I went to sleep until this morning, there's a blank. I don't even remember my dreams, honestly. Sometimes I do. Most of the time I don't. Some people are good at that. I'm not good at that. Only the dreams just before waking up I remember. Or unless it's a nightmare, I remember that. Anyway, the point is, there's a blank from last night when I went to sleep until this morning when I woke up. Yeah. And so likewise, there's a blank when we were children because the mental consciousness, even though it was active, it was doing it, objects and so forth, but now we're using our coarse mind and we cannot recollect it. We've never been able to really control it as children. It's random. It's like we can't really, let's think about this. Let's think about this. It doesn't happen. Yeah. But of course, we do know that there is a time, of course, of the six sense spheres. They don't all arise at the same time. It's obviously the physical sense sphere, feeling cold and heat and, feeling vibrations. That's what probably happens first. And then, I don't know, of ear, eye, ear, nose, tongue. I don't know which is first. I suppose it's the eyes then. Or the ears. No, the ears, Mom. The ears. All right, there you go. It's the ears. Then the eyes. And then probably later taste and smell. So it doesn't really happen. I said it's a very simplified way of doing this. But it needs certain physical basis now. Does that make sense? With the brain?
No, but you're saying something very interesting. You're saying that we fall asleep because the subtle level of mind
must manifest.
Yeah?
Yeah, they must manifest. I mean, we can only keep the coarser level for that long. Because, of course, our delusions exhaust us, that too. I mean, if we had less delusions, we would have to sleep less. Our delusions exhaust us. Our mind rapidly going here, there, here, there, here, there. The more stressful your day, the more you need to sleep. Even if it's just mental stress. Yeah? If you start doing meditation, you're calming the mind. You don't need those subtle, but you still eventually need to sleep. But a highly realized being actually sleeps in the sense that the subtle levels manifest, but they're manifest the whole time, So it's not like they need to actually fall unconscious for a while. They can still, move around. So this is my explanation. I mean, this is not really what I've seen in the scriptures, why they don't need to sleep. But this would make sense to me in a tantric context, that these subtle levels are now manifested and they can utilize them. It's all about manifesting and utilizing subtle levels of mind when you come to tantra. Highest yoga tantra. In lower tantras, you don't do that. Okay, but this is why I always want to warn people, because you start trying to control the subtle energy winds that your minds ride on, that your minds depend on. And if you do something wrong, if you get your energy winds mixed up, you get your mind mixed up, and it can be so bad, you can be, need to be institutionalized because you've really gone crazy, literally. So this is why Tantra is very dangerous once you get to certain levels, and it's kept so secret. And I always warn people. I mean, I love to warn the Emory students because they're really interested in Tantra somehow, and then they're so scared. All their papers are about the dangers of Tantra. I like that. I think it's better to be a little scared, have respect for it, still, for the sake of imprints, to kind of look into it, but understanding this is far beyond me, and there'll be a time at some point, but this is not the time yet. So to not totally keep away from it, but also not to think this is my main practice. No way. I mean, all the practitioners in the world, I guess the real tantric practitioners, you can probably count them on 10 fingers, or maybe a little more than that, but there's not many. And there's only some very few people really qualified to practice highest yoga tantra. But it's interesting still to hear about it, and to know about it, and have the faith in that, because eventually that's where we're going to go. Anyway. It's exactly 11 o'clock, so. Well, no. It's 4 minutes to 11. This is too fast. So I'm not going to waste 4 minutes. Pardon? Oh, I have a question. I'm sorry. Very important. Okay. The clairvoyance. What about clairvoyance? So this is a good question. People being clairvoyant, so it actually came up. does the future already exist? Because if we have clairvoyance, does the future already exist? So in other words, can you have future imprints if they don't exist yet? Right? It's an interesting question. So the future must already exist, at least on a subtle level. No, it doesn't. But this is an interesting question. Our idea that we can only know something if it exists now or has already existed. But this is a little bit to do with our sense of time too. Yeah? We have a very fixed way of time. It's an expression of our ignorance. It's a result of our way of seeing things so solidly, seeing time linear in that sense. I mean, we're so fixed in that way. We're not aware of the relativity of time, of course. And Einstein's idea sounds great, but it also goes like, what? Right? It's almost like it goes very much against our sense of time. It's terribly relative, actually. But moreover, the future has not existed yet. It's not existing yet. But you can still know about it. It doesn't mean it's existing already. Yeah, but you can still know about it. It's like the causes and condition that leads to it, they're here already. So you want to say it's fixed? Well, in a way, it is. And if you watch those movies that people go back in time and change the future, it's just a movie. That's not possible to travel in time. It's gone. It's already, it's disintegrated. You cannot make it come back again, whatever happened. You can go back in your mind in the sense of memory, but you cannot actually, So just as the past doesn't exist anymore and you can think about it now, so you can think about the future and know it now without needing anything to be there. So it's not imprints. For anything to know, there is imprints, other imprints that you have. Imprints of meditation possibly, that allow you to see the future. But you don't have to have an imprint from some future I consciousness that leaves an imprint for you to see it now. That's not possible. Because the future I consciousness is only going to arise in the future. And the clairvoyance is not an I consciousness, it's a mental consciousness. Where you can see what's going to happen in the future. Yes.
One of the schools is talking about that the future is before the past, actually.
Which school is that?
I don't remember.
I've never heard of that. If it's a Buddhist school, no.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
one
that's
school.
it.
No. There's one Buddhist school that talks about cause and effect existing at the same time. That is there. That's the Vaibhashika school. They have that assertion. Cause and effect. But maybe if you could do some research and let me know.
I'll show you. It is. I know what you mean, but they don't say that one is before the time. I'll show you.
Okay, so.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about this. I'm almost interested in new Buddhist schools.
No, because it's logical, because the future is there, although we don't know it. So he is forward.
Okay, I can tell you how I know it. The future exists, the past exists, the present exists, but not now. In general, the three times exist, but not now. There's a difference of saying something exists and something exists now. Right? In the past, the present didn't exist and the future didn't exist. In the present, the past and the future don't exist.
That's what you mean.
And in the future,
Okay. Sorry.
that's what I say. In the present, right now, the past doesn't exist and the future doesn't exist. In the past, yesterday, today's present didn't exist, and the future of tomorrow didn't exist. In the future, now the present has stopped existing and the past has stopped existing. So I'm talking about present, past, and future from this perspective here, and then I take the three times and so you can only ever have one of the three existing. But going down to inherent existence, when we look at the present, we don't even find a present. So it's like we have a very kind of hazy view of past, present, and future, but let's say the present now, let's find a present moment, a smallest moment of present, and we don't find it. But of course, conventionally, there's a present. It's this moment right now. In this moment right now, the future hasn't existed yet, but I can still know it. I can still know it through clairvoyance. I mean, the Buddha is said to know the three times simultaneously, even though a Buddha does only exist, in the present or, in a certain time, of course. Yeah. So it's not that it must have had existed before. It's a special ability of the mind. And in this way, you could say the future is fixed. Yeah, I mean, you know, in a way, there's only one thing that's going to happen. The causes and conditions will lead to some event in the future, and that's what's going to happen. Now, how these causes and conditions are put together, we don't know right now. There's going to be one way in which it's going to be. There's only one future. There's going to be one situation in 2012, on the 1st of January of 2012.
Why can't I change it now or influence it? If the cause, there's one causal condition which leads to something.
Of course you can, but you know, if you do it, then there's this, you see, the question would be, if you see the future, can you change it? You see the future, you see what happens in the future. I mean, maybe it's a bit like the potential. You see the potential that could, I mean, there's only going to be one scenario. Let's say go left or right. You're going to go left or right. There's only one option that you do. So now you see the future and you see yourself going right. That's kind of the potential of what could happen. You see the causes and conditions, and therefore and you can kind of know from there, or you have like an intuition of what's going to happen. I don't think a clairvoyance is really like the same as seeing it out there. It's like an intuition. Yeah, it's not that, it's a hazier kind of understanding. So maybe you just see the potential. Yeah, you see the potential. I know when some lamas make a divination, they see what could happen. They see your obstacles. You see, like when you want to get a visa, for example, that's the classic mo. Yeah, well, I did lots of mo's for a visa. So, you know, for a visa you go, and then they see what obstacles you have, and then they see, so they see this would lead. They kind of intuitively somehow know through their, you know, level of mind. They know what could keep you away. That it doesn't look good for a visa. So they basically see this. And then they say, well, there's something you can do about removing that obstacle, hopefully. And then they tell you to do certain, you know, pujas, you know, some you know, prayers to be done. They can, through the power of those pujas, through the blessing of those pujas, they can remove the obstacles. You usually give something for them, so you make a karmic connection to make it effective, and then that's changed, you know, you get rid of it. And then whatever they've seen actually comes in a different way. So I think it's more like they see the potential of what could happen. And then they let you know, and then you see what you can do about it. So there's a danger of so-and-so. But eventually what will happen is what will happen. Either you'll do the puja, you won't do the puja, we don't know yet, right? We don't know right now, but then in the end, on that day when you get the visa, you'll find out. See what I'm saying? I mean, it's only going to happen in one way. We can't kind of go back in time and then make it, you know, have the 1st of January 2012 again in another way. That's my point. It's only going to be one way. And sometimes we can know about it, but it's more knowing about the causes and conditions, and therefore knowing what's the potential of what's going to happen. Does that explain that? I mean, I'm not a good person to ask about clairvoyance. I mean, I don't know. In the text, there's only this much explanation of there's clairvoyance. So-and-so has clairvoyance. So-and-so doesn't have clairvoyance. And this is when you get clairvoyance, and so forth. Anyway, so... oh, okay.
No, אולי אני לא מבינה איזה נכון. The futureness of an object exists before...
The future of an object exists
before the object itself.
Maybe אני לא מבינה instead of...
Okay, this is the last thing.
Not the future, it's the futureness.
Ah, the futureness. Okay, that's different again. Okay.
I don't have it anymore.
And then...
Do you remember the number of the page? It says Sutra
I just
School.
got it through the index, I couldn't remember where was it exactly.
I mean, we're a little over time. We could probably do it. Yeah.
Yes.
Let's do it after. There's some time
Yeah.
afterwards. I can look at it personally, and let's finish class for today and meet again in the afternoon. By the way, you could do it in Hebrew. I mean, I think it's nice if you can do it in Hebrew. So let's do the prayers in Hebrew, actually. The last ones, if you have a tune.
Dedication on page 11. We'll do it in Hebrew. בתודעת ההערה העילאית לקראת הערב שטרם נולדה מתכבדת ותתעצם, וזו שנולדה לא תתלונן ותשביע בכבוד. הודות לפוטנציאל זכות זה, להשיג במהרה את המצב המואר של ברור תודה. אזי יהיה בכוחי לשחרר את כל בעלי התודעה מסביבם. או שמג'ושרי עז הרוח, גם שמותיו הדרע, ראו נכוחה את הדברים כפי שהם. כך אקדיש אף אני את כל פוטנציאל הזכות הזה, בדרך הטובה ביותר, ויהיו הם לי למופת. אקדיש את כל שורשי החיוביות האלה והקדשה שהמנצחים, החולפים אל מעבר, בשלושת הזמנים, היללוה כטובה ביותר, ויהיה בכוחי לבצע את מעשיה בטיסת והנעלים. בארץ זו מוקפת רכסי הרים ושלגים, מקור הרווחה והעושר ללא יוצר מן הכלל, אבל לא תשבר הרע בעוצמה, תן זנגיאצו, לא תוותר עד קץ הטיב.